To start the Photo Prize event, and I think people will start coming in, but I don't want to be delayed. We are going to be hitting some dead stops, so we really need to start. It's absolutely a pleasure for me to really welcome you here today for this very interesting evening, what we call as the Photo Prize ceremony. This is the third cohort of the event, and I've been very proud to really curate this in this country. We have actually had some great partners who have made it possible for us to really take it forward. I would like to especially thank Roland Berger, who's been our process partner. I would like to thank IICA for all its support. I would like to thank Canon as well. So that's how it is. But this has actually been one interesting journey that we have been able to build, and it wouldn't have been possible without your active support and motivation. So Dr. Chatterjee, thanks to you, Rahul, Roland Berger. But now I would actually like to move forward fairly quickly. In fact, we are going to have Mr. Gangal, Rahul Gangal, who is the principal, with Roland Berger, who's actually going to be the master of ceremony, who's going to take care of the proceedings from here on. As I said, Roland Berger is the process partner here, who's actually helped us do a lot of stuff. Rahul, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to a reasonably exciting evening, and we are keenly working our way towards the award ceremony, which is later today. To start off with, we'll start with a panel we are all looking forward to. The panel will deliberate on economic, social progress and creating shared value. The panel will be moderated by Sandeep Khanna, and I would request Mr. Khanna to come on the stage from the leadership team of Mint. The panel will have Mr. Aditya Vij, the CEO of Fortis Healthcare India Limited, Mr. Ajay Veer Jakhar, Chairman of the Bharat Krishak Samaj. May I request the speakers to come on the dais, please. Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee, the Director General and CEO of the IICA, Shelly Batra, Co-founder and President Operation ASHA, Rakesh Amol, President Infrastructure KEC International, R.S. Subramaniam, Senior Vice President and MD, DHL Express. It's important in today's day and age to have a very clear understanding of how to build shared value, and by that, a concept of shared value that enhances the organization's ability to communicate and contribute to its community in a reasonable manner. Over to you, Sandeep, and best of luck.
Okay, we've got a fairly tight schedule, so what I'll do is I'll start off by asking each of our panelists to just spend a minute or so giving their perspective on the issue itself, concentrating really on the term shared value, because I think that's really the key to the whole thing here. And ma'am, if we could start with you, if you're comfortable.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shelly Batra. I'm the co-founder and president of Operation ASHA. So basically, I'm a gynecologist. I was practicing in South Delhi for a long time, and then I started doing TB treatment in the slums of India. So now the topic is shared value. So I think it is very important that we understand once and for all that corporates and social enterprises are not on opposite sides of the fence. We are in this together. And from the little I know of business, which is very little, the aim of the business is to deliver value, to do good, not to make money. That may have been so 2 centuries ago, but no longer. And if that is so, then we have to think in terms of giving value. And there is a value add if corporates partner with the government, if they partner with non-profits, or if all of them partner together, why not? We can provide a shared value. Now in Operation ASHA, we are doing TB treatment. So we are doing the last mile delivery. We are delivering the best results at a fraction of the cost sustained by other organizations. So those who are supporting me, they are getting a return on investment. You spend $80 to treat a TB patient, you get a return of, well, I'll say it in rupees now, 15 lakh rupees, because the patient gets health, productivity, there's saving in costs to the economy. Tell me which business will give you this kind of value. So I think if we put our heads together and we realize we can work together as a team, we can provide shared value, and the values for the government, because the government cannot do the last mile delivery. The NGOs are there at grassroots level. The governments are very big infrastructures. They are providing us with a lot of basics, like the RNTCP, the TB control program, malaria program, blindness prevention, polio prevention. It's all there. But who is going to provide the connectivity to the poorest of the poor? That the NGO will do with the help of the corporates. And I think that is what shared value is all about.
Thanks very much. That makes a lot of sense. Aditya, you want to take it from here and look at it from the corporate perspective? That's how it's shared.
Yes, so I say, my name is Aditya Vij. I'm responsible for Fortis Healthcare activities in India. Interestingly, in our domain, whenever we talk with, call it industry partners or call healthcare partners, we say that we're in the social sector. We happen to be providing a service which is needed by all of us at some stage of our lives, and therefore, for the billion out there who do not have access today. So I think the idea of still being a for-profit enterprise, at the same time creating value for a larger section of the population, go hand in hand from our perspective. I have a very interesting, simple example. Obviously there are many examples that other companies have, collectively done. But one example that we have is that there is a huge shortage of ICU beds in the country. 70,000 equipped ICU beds, requirement of 400,000. That practically means that you're going to lose the patient if the patient is not treated on time. We came up with a concept, we were the pioneers in Asia, in collaboration with GE, albeit an American company, to launch what we call Kriti Next, an eICU concept, electronic ICU, where we have a huge command center at one of our large hospitals, and we have started to service hundreds of beds in remote areas through technology that is available today. Interestingly, all you need is not even a partially trained nurse in an ICU bed can treat a patient as though the best intensivist in the country would be treating that patient. These kind of examples are in dozens, in scores, in hundreds, where enterprises have determined what is the need out there to help society, at the same time made models around it still being a profitable project. For us, we are looking for return on investment, not to pay dividends, by and large, which is something we've not done to date. On the other hand, to keep on redeploying in the work that we do to affect more tens of thousands of people in society. Our aim is today at 2.5 million patients that we see a year in the system. How do we take it to the 5 million, to the 10 million, and so on and so forth? So models can be created successfully where it is for profit. Paybacks are slow, paybacks are longer. On the other hand, there's a win-win for the ultimate patient, the society, the enterprise, and for all the doctors and nurses that we engage.
Thank you. Rakesh, if I could come to you now. In the infrastructure sector that you work in and your companies work in, what do you think is the shared value that you can actually create?
I'm Rakesh Amol. I work for KEC International. We are in the infrastructure segment, primarily into transmission and distribution, also a little bit into railways, water, and others. So I'll mostly speak from where the social value is relevant to us and what we have done. A couple of years back, it probably kicked off from the regulatory aspect of having a social obligation, and we started from there. But soon the organization realized the value of this and invested more into the people. I'll give you specific examples in terms of what the organization does. Being in the transmission business, we do transmission towers and we put strings across them all over the country and now all over the world. One of the key things that we need in this is a huge amount of intervention of labor moving across different geographies. And we often found that we trained people into doing it, which was a little bit skilled, and we lost them over a period of time because they would go back to their places and it would be difficult to train again or bring them back. So we moved into the geographies where the skilled people came in, and started training people over there, opening in terms of political institutes, polytechnics, other ITIs. Also imparting language education to them so that we could move these people into other geographies where we have businesses in Africa, Brazil, other places. So a whole lot of the shared value in terms of the business is going in terms of bringing these people who are who are the lowest element, but bring a lot of value in the execution, which is what we do. Similar examples are where we do the stringing jobs in the railways, where again, very, very skilled people are required to do that, and they come from a very specific geography. These skills have been passed on by generations, and the organization feels that, okay, and geographies like where even not many people like to go, where we have Maoist intervention and others. But over a period of time, we have developed interface. We have developed certain initiatives in these areas wherein we are able to engage with them and give them the value by which they can integrate with the businesses and they come back again on their own. Not only them, their families and others. We have modeled the same thing even in geographies like J&K, where not many people like to go. But then we go there, we train people into doing our skill jobs, bring them out also from there, move into different geographies, not again in India. So this is what we do. Specifically, in terms of, somebody mentioned in the earlier session that you land up in Patna, you see all hoardings of English language and all. We also go there, and we pick up these people who have gone through these language courses and others because we need them. Not necessarily they are learning English to do their MBAs. They are learning English also to perform in geographies like Middle East and others, and a whole lot of places in Africa where we can use them. So we raise them up the ladder in terms of the performance by giving certain skills. And over a period of time, we have also tied up with the customers like Power Grid and others and moved this concept into developing people which others can also use. So it's an institution now. These places where these skills get developed, people get developed, they serve us, and they serve the entire industry. That's it.
Thanks very much. Ajay, can we, you work very closely with the farm sector. You probably know the ins and outs of that sector, how people there think. Do you think there is a divide between how they think and how the corporate sector views them?
I am a farmer myself. I stay on the farm, and we also advocate for better policies for farmers. I would say shared value is not corporate social responsibility. And increasingly, the farming community would look at shared value today by the corporate sector as a public relations exercise. It's increasingly because we know of cases where the corporate sector has spent more money in advertising their corporate social responsibility and use that. The problem is, how do you measure the value creation in the other stakeholder? It's very easy for corporates to measure value creation. Your balance sheet goes better, you treat better patients, you give better services, your balance sheet increases. But what about the person on the other side? What about the farmer there? I'll give you an example of how confusion is there. The World Bank aided projects in India for agro waste management. So the government gave subsidies, you got carbon ratings for bio waste, for making electricity out of bio waste. So what happened? Something that was free for cooking in all villages of India suddenly had a value to it. So at one stage, you had corporate houses putting up bio electricity generation units. At the other stage, you had villagers for whom that it was fuel for cooking, and they don't have that fuel anymore. It has a value. You put value to something. So I think as a farmer, I would say you need to understand the value that's being created for the other person on the other side of the fence, and that's the crucial thing. For example, farmers blame economists for getting us bad policies. I'm sorry if there's an economist here. Economists blame politicians for not listening to good policies, and politicians blame voters for putting unrealistic demands on them. And this cycle goes on and on. And at the end of every year, I think so in every country of the world, people talk of growth by GDP numbers. And I think that because one of the topics other than shared value in this thing was on social progress. GDP, I would say, is not a measure of social progress. A farmer is on a tractor, the tractor has an accident, the GDP of the country goes up. That's how the GDP operates. And one person makes an extra $1 billion on the balance sheet, 1 billion people in the country don't make any income, the GDP still goes up. And that's what I'm trying to say, is the corporate sector needs to understand that shared value of the stakeholder on the other side of the fence. And that's lacking, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Bhaskar, could come to you now. Yeah, I'll come to him. I know you'd wanted to be last on, but I thought if you could comment on what Ajay just spoke about, because that's clearly the nub of the issue, you know, that we need to address that before we get on to the rest of the stuff, really.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. My name is Bhaskar Chatterjee. I'm Director General and CEO of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. That institute is charged with the primary responsibility of rolling out Section 135 of the newly passed Companies Act of 2013. And that very clearly is what we call the corporate social responsibility agenda. When I met with Michael Porter 2 years ago at Harvard, very clearly he spent quite some time explaining to me the concept of shared value. And I grew up reading a lot of his stuff and understanding it. Basically, that concept of shared value is about corporates doing work or selling products or doing business in some way or the other, but out of that business also helping poor or marginalized or otherwise disaffected people. But principally, it's about doing business first and then helping others along the way. And if others get help, then your value is shared with them. That's broadly the concept of shared value. In India, the legislation that's been passed is a fair bit different and actually takes into account much about what Ajay and Shelley have spoken. It states, first of all, that you need to spend 2% of your profits on CSR. So first of all, you need to say exactly what your expenditure is. It's expenditure related. If it is not rupee measurable, it will not be counted as CSR. So you need to first upfront put your money where your mouth is and say, this is how much I spent. Of course, the impact that your project or program that you undertake in CSR is vitally important, but it will be measured against what you spent on it. Therefore, you can easily compare whether the impact is equivalent to the amount you spent. And many corporates have welcomed that as a very transparent way of doing what they want to do. The second thing we've said there is that if you are doing any aspect of CSR, as you, Aditya, rightly said, it must help at the end of the day the poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged. We're not here to give scholarships to Mr. Ambani's children. The idea is whatever you do in CSR must, end of the day, help those who are in need of help. Otherwise, we've more or less made sure that corporates and boards pretty much can choose what area they want to be. There are 10 areas in Schedule 7, all of them very broad areas, and boards of companies are encouraged to interpret them as liberally as they can. There's a very simple format in which you report once a year. Also, we made the whole legislation using this international principle of comply or explain. So even if you don't spend your 2%, you can always ascribe reasons to why you didn't spend it. So there is no compulsion or no, mandate from the government that you must do or else. It's much more an inclusive atmosphere that we are trying to do and an enabling atmosphere that we're trying to propagate. But heart of it is this: civil society and corporate India must come together, help each other, and the third part of the triangle, government, would create that enabling atmosphere. If all these three work together, we have a very serious, very productive CSR agenda ahead of us.
Right. Would you like to add something to it?
Okay, good evening. My name is Subramanian. I head the DHL Express business in the country. I think some interesting points from Ajay and Mr. Chatterjee on CSR and shared value. I think DPDHL, which is our parent, and DHL Express in India, we have a slightly different take on the concept of shared value and CSR, and I would like to explain that. I think much before the CSR Act and the mandate from the government came, about 5-6 years back, globally we made a pronouncement called as a living responsibility commitment. The living responsibility commitment, the biggest thrust, we have about 500,000 employees globally. The biggest thrust of the living responsibility commitment is, apart from a few things which we as a corporate will do from the center in each of the countries we operate in, we want to see each and every one of the 500,000 employees involved in doing something to the society in which the company is operating. Yeah, because I think the shared value and CSR and the whole agenda of contributing to the society doesn't come from just this vague animal called corporate entity. I think every single person who's involved in the business, who's part of the organization, must share that value. Yeah, must share that value and say, like, what is it that our organization is standing for? What is the commitment we are giving to the society? And how we as an individual employee, every single person who make up this organization, can do something about it. So we made pronouncements on 3 themes. So it's called Go Green, Go Teach, and Go Help. Yeah. Go Green very clearly is about the environment, but we made a very specific pronouncement as a corporate, which is something as a corporate and business which we can do. Because we are the largest logistics service provider across the globe, we fly planes, we run thousands of vehicles, therefore we leave behind a hefty carbon footprint. In 2010, we made a commitment that by 2020, the absolute value of the carbon footprint which we as an organization will be leaving behind, we'll cut it by 30%. Yeah. In the last 5 years, I think several measures we've taken in terms of more efficient vehicles, more optimized routing, series of things. And we are well ahead of the milestones we've set for ourselves. That's on Go Green. And apart from this, we also try to sell logistics products which are carbon neutral products. And there are customers who can buy it. And along with that, they earn carbon credits, and that is recycled into Go Green projects, yeah, carbon credit reduction project, carbon emission reduction projects. The second theme of Go Help. Yeah. We have globally a disaster recovery process and a team of volunteers who are DHL employees. In each region across the world, for example, in India, there are at least 45 to 50 employees of the group who are trained to be volunteers at the time of any natural disaster happens. So therefore, this disaster recovery team, DPDHL has a arrangement with UN. So we have a treaty with UN, and therefore UN invites DPDHL and DPDHL disaster recovery team to come and help during big natural disasters. For example, the tsunami in Sri Lanka, earthquake in Indonesia, Bangladesh typhoon or cyclone situation. What do we do? We don't go and do just like that the typical kind of volunteering, clearing debris, etc., etc. We go and set up a logistics hub for all the relief material which comes in. The biggest challenge in any natural calamity is that tons of relief material arrive, but nobody has control on what came in and what went where. It goes to the wrong places. How do you ensure that what is coming in is accounted for and it goes to where it's supposed to provide help? So we run that, and people are trained to run that, and we arrive at on invitation from UN, and we run it. So it's a global program. And it happens almost in every big natural calamity. If there are 10 such things happening globally, 5 or 6 possibly there will be a DHL disaster recovery hub. The last pillar is Go Teach, which is predominantly revolving around providing education to the underprivileged. Globally, we are associated with Teach for All, and India, we are associated with Teach for India. While we do material donation to them, yeah, the biggest drive in Teach for India is for our employees to be associated with the Teach for India fellows when they are training, so that they can be in the classroom, help them conduct sessions, do something for the classes. For example, last year, we had about 250 computers, which were end of life for us. Yeah, so therefore, we would have replaced them anyway with the new generation computers. We got them cleaned up, made them working, and tried to help Teach for India to set up computer labs in schools. But a lot of it comes from our own people finding these ideas, going and setting it up. So therefore, to me, the shared value, what are we creating? We are saying that there is a pronouncement from the corporate, but every single employee is involved in making it, bringing it alive in the marketplace where we are there. And therefore, we create a name for ourselves, but more importantly, I think we engage our people to think in the direction in which the corporate wants to think. I think there's a lot of merit in volunteering, and volunteering is fundamental to any kind of corporate social responsibility. Corporates can donate, and which they should. Yeah, but I think involving more and more people builds a very conscientious team, and therefore you are alive to the reality around you in the society.
Right. You know, one of the problems that I am sensing from this panel and from other discussions that we've all been part of is that we tend to look upon this as philanthropy, as charity, as something, you know, we need to do to clear our conscience. How do we bail out this whole, you know, this bogey of CSR and take it into a zone which is shared value, which is actual value, which means something to the person on the ground? Azri, you want to go?
Yeah, so see, I'll just firstly, there are a couple of points that I picked up that I'd like to address coming from the corporate sector. For us, in a manner of speaking, I mentioned we are in the social sector. For us, the first tenet of everybody working in our group in the healthcare domain is service before self. So the 24/7 dedication that people go way beyond their call of duty often, and I can tell you that our vice chairman would be at a facility as well, should there be a crisis. Our job, as we call it, and I have our chief medical officer and very senior clinician with us today, is first and foremost, it's the patient and how you can help. Whether we charge for it, whether we do it part of our CSR activity, whether it is part of the free beds that we have to supply is another matter. So I think every employee at Fortis today would be involved in going beyond the call of duty as and when needed, and often, as you can imagine, in the healthcare sector, it would be a norm. I think the second aspect I want to say is where there is creation. I'll just take another example. Novartis came into India many decades ago, and they were not addressing 75% of the population. And they came up with this Arogya Parivar program where they actually trained thousands of people in remote areas, linked them to their sales teams to make medication available to the masses, and today are treating in 33,000 villages almost 3.8 crore, 38 million people who would otherwise not have had access. So again, quite honestly, they are serving society, but for a profit. I mean, they sell at a cost. The question is, how much are we willing to go out of our way to create models that will benefit society? So, I mean, it's a similar example I gave EICU. I mean, you're saving lives, which otherwise would have no access to an ICU bed because of the critical condition that they may be in. Now, this project, initially, as a typical evaluation in our financial world, would not pass muster. But because it created value for the ultimate patient, other examples that we take, for example, in our case, is where you have community connect. Each of our facilities, and we have 66 of them across the country, has engaged with local communities, has adopted some village, some community, some Mofussil area for them to make education for free on health. And prevention is a huge problem in India due to the hygiene factors that we have. They've adopted programs that will educate the common man and as well as the educated part of society on advanced disease patterns and so on and so forth as well. We run Sunday conversations. Our clinicians, our teams are sitting on Sunday where they're not obliged to in actually taking community care programs to our hospitals to explain what to do to prevent all the kind of disease. Honestly, if you were to just go by the rule book, prevention is against our tenet because we are we provide healthcare. So it's a win-win from our perspective where you create that awareness, you create a healthy society. On the other hand, the reality is that all of us will require healthcare, and there it's an advantage to a certain extent to Fortis, where Fortis name would come up first. So I still maintain certainly the corporate sector, profit is not a bad word. We just happen to be in the social sector. So we are much more advantaged, I would say, from the nature of our business to be able to impact. So we've created different models of being able to benefit society, and all of them are not our patients, but when and if, should they need care, they will come to us. So it's kind of a win-win from that perspective.
I will touch on 2 points that have been mentioned by my co-panelists, and a little more in depth. I will talk both of the donor perspective and of the NGO perspective. Now, what does the donor want? The donor wants the NGO partner to fulfill a need, to give value for the dollar, and to have a measurable impact. And here lies the rub. As Shakespeare has said, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Now, when you see the NGO sector, everyone is working. There are millions of NGOs, but what are you doing? People say, I'm eradicating poverty, I'm improving nutrition amongst tribals. You're improving nutrition, has the hemoglobin gone up? Has the weight gone up? Is the school performance better? Athletic performance better? What have you measured? You have measured nothing. What gets measured has been done. That is a general principle. If you are saying we have treated so many million poor, yes, you have treated. If you say we have just treated, then you have not treated at all. So I think you will agree on that. Now, I will give you an interesting example. The World Bank, very focused on TB, the biggest health issue in the world, the biggest infectious disease, biggest global emergency, etc., etc. The World Bank gave $100 million to India as a donation, if you please, in 2006. Another $170 million 3 years ago, another $100 million this year. Where has all the money gone? We have 1.5 million new cases getting TB every year, and incomplete TB leading to drug-resistant TB who are going around without treatment. So if the benefit of the donation does not trickle to the poorest of the poor, what is the point of the donation? And if the NGOs do not utilize the money effectively, they are the biggest criminals in the universe. So before NGOs even ask for donation, they have to clean up their act. And I think it is very important we should all keep in mind. We are all working towards a common goal. We are all on same sides of the fence. We are all working together. So let us help each other in achieving the best results possible.
Yeah, I think that's a interesting point. It also raises the issue, why do we need so many NGOs? Is it because there is a gap, whether it's from the institutional framework or from the legislative framework? Ajay, just coming to you, I'll give you this one. The question I wanted to ask you was, what's the way forward? The agriculture sector, the farming sector is obviously a huge constituent of our economy. How do we kind of breach this gap that is quite clearly and visibly there at this point of time? What would you say is the agenda?
So as a farmers organization, for 2 years we advocated that the agriculture input industry get income tax benefits for providing extension services. Those are the kind of things you need to incentivize the corporate sector to do better for the society. But having said that, I'm not a communist. I think capitalism provides the perfect means for social development. But there is a problem with this corporate social responsibility structure. There are 2 kinds of people that we have in society. There's the organized sector and there's the unorganized sector. The unorganized sector would be farmers and others like us, and then there would be the organized sector, which would be the public sector or the private sector. And I'll give you the example of Europe now, because in Europe, a lot of social benefits are given by the government to the retired people. Now, if the corporate sector was to do better, why should the government fund those social benefits for the retired people? Rather than do corporate social responsibility, it's better you do responsibility for your own employees, and that the government, whichever government it is not responsible for looking after your employees after they retire. I mean, I think that's the first thing that the corporate sector must be doing, and that's creating value. Once you have been able to look after your retired employees, you should be looking after society. I don't think so it should be the other way around. And I'm just saying, because coming from the unorganized sector, we don't get any benefits. There's no pension for farmers. There's lots of other benefits which are available to the organized sector. They're not available to farmers. So the feelings are very strong. And I really think that any corporate employee that retires and looks for benefits from the government past the age of 60, 70, and 80, I think the corporate sector has failed that employee and has failed the society. And this is a common feeling that, and you see, even Europe is going down because of the extra expenditure they have to do on this today. And as India expands as an economy, more and more people will be employed in the private sector. And that's exactly what our Prime Minister's statement yesterday about Make My India is. And we hope that comes true. But at the same time, the corporate sector must gear up to look after their own employees and not look to the government. Once you've done with them, then you leave them to the whims of the government policies. I think so that's where we must draw a line.
Thanks. Bhaskar, quick comment on that, if you could, what would be the government perspective on this?
Well, I suppose it's a good step, but I don't know whether that's really concerned with the discussion here. I mean, whether employees down the line, corporates look after them or government looks after them is a huge economic tangle out there. Rather than tread on that very delicate territory, what I was saying was that the point that Shelley made, this combination between the corporate sector and the NGOs. There are, at this point of time, believe it or not, 3.3 million NGOs registered in India, 33 lakhs. The presumption is that even if they are registered, about half of them probably operate. That's good enough. If you want to carry out a CSR agenda in India, you wouldn't need more than that. How many companies fall under Section 135? Around 16,000. Now, how many companies are there in India? About 1,100,000. Now, 1,100,000 companies, only 16,000 fall under the Companies Act. So it's really the fat cats, the people who really make profits, who are more or less required to do some kind of CSR. And the fact does remain that many of them, as you rightly pointed out, have in fact been doing fair amount under what was then known as CSR in more ways than one. All that the Act really has done is to try and create some sort of a landscape, some sort of a way forward by which now both the corporate world and the NGOs can come forward and show to the world at large what exactly they are doing, to showcase it well. We've provided in the legislation also some elements of capacity building. Up to 5% of your CSR expenditure you can use to build the capacities of people in your own organization. As he said, so much of the CSR spirit comes from your own employees. And anything that you do to build CSR awareness among your employees is part of your CSR expenditure.
Sure.
Also for NGOs, and you rightly said that unless NGOs step up to the plate, unless they maximize their own possibilities and probabilities, they've been crying hoarse the last 3 or 4 decades, give us a chance, give us a chance, give us a chance. Now they have it. They need to grab it and show the world what they can really do. And therefore, even in the legislation, corporates can spend, suppose you engage an NGO, and you believe that it needs to actually up its act, you can actually spend money on them for capacity development, and that's also part of your CSR expenditure. So what we've tried to do here is create a scenario where the hand-holding between the parent corporate and the partner NGO becomes a win-win relationship between them. Who benefits? The community for which they work. And that's exactly the point of this whole progress. Thank you.
Yeah. Rakesh, Mr. Subramanian, we have very little time. Quick comments so that we can then take some questions from the audience.
Again, I would like to reiterate what you mentioned in between, that we have to take this concept of shared value out of the realms of just CSR or philanthropy, wherein we see that any contribution that we are making to the society is coming back to us and creating more value for us, more value measurable. And corporates are today trying to institute mechanisms by which this can be measured. That whether, like for us, we have taken education as one aspect. whether it is imparting language, foreign language, imparting special skills to people who contribute in doing the whole lot of work that we do. And that is what I'd like to say, that we have to integrate, we have to take it out of this concept of philanthropy and just CSR, which is kind of a mandatory through a company law board, and make it more relevant and a partner to the business that we are in, and we measure it and give it back, we'll get back more in terms of creating value. That's it.
So if you could like.
I think without very fair points made. I think the CSR which the corporates do, I don't think can plug all the gaps we see around the country. Yeah, so I don't think we should even go into the CSR part of what corporates should do. The way I look at it is that we have, in my company, I have 2,500, 3,000 employees. If I run an organization which really takes care of them, yeah, which provides for them, makes them capable of facing their daily challenges, take care of their families, and build a very healthy ecosystem for them. Yeah, I think I've done fundamentally what I'm supposed to do as a corporate. Meaning we are in the business, we do what we do well, we deliver on what we promise to our customers, they reward us with good growth and profits. But am I doing the equivalent to my employees, to the ecosystem which I am responsible for? Each corporate is a country. How well are you running it? Yeah, how well are your citizens? Yeah, that's the first responsibility. If you've done that, then I think other part you will do very well, because you're used to running a very efficient, excellent organization which has its responsibilities and which walks the talk. Yeah, I think the corporate should run their show very well. The fortune begins at home.
That's a nice contrarian view. Maybe we can get some quick questions, maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Yes, the gentleman in front, please. Somebody, can you give him a mic?
I'm Arvinda Brara, Chairman and Managing Director of Mantech Consultants. My question is that in this session we've covered CSR and social and economic aspects. One of the things which I think we need very badly is to promote ethics. And I think there needs to be some kind of a link in whether corporate responsibility or CSR or whatever, to help promote ethical values in society, in government, in all our dealings. So I'd like some reactions on what you think about it.
Somebody like to take that question? Bhaskar?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Rara, I couldn't agree with you more. The whole thrust of corporate governance in India is to try and move towards promoting corporate ethics as much as we can see. And we also know that much of the economic downturn of 2008-9 pointed the finger exactly at where corporate ethics had completely fouled up. The very shameless pursuit of greed brought the world to its knees. Unfortunately, the subject today is a bit different, and if we enter this domain, then I'm afraid we would, get into a situation where it would be a never-ending debate.
That's right.
I just a very quick comment, Mr. Brah. So I guess the message is participating in any educational form and promoting ethical, or we call it integrity in our system, as an example, and being proud of it. I think as part of not only CSR, but our broader objective of even the sector that we are in, there are one and many examples of how it is being done, and perhaps we could take it offline.
We'll have to close at this point. The panelists are available if you want to ask them some questions later on, but I think we'll have to wind up now, right? Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause for a very entertaining discussion on a very tough topic. May I at this juncture request Professor Rishikesh Krishnan, the Director of IIM Indore, to come and felicitate our guests. Mr. Aditya Vij, CEO Fortis Healthcare Limited. Mr. Ajay Veer Jakhad, Chairman of the Bharat Krishak Samaj. Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee, Director General and CEO of IICA. Shelly Batra, Co-founder and President of Operation Asha. Rakesh Amol, the President, Infrastructure, KEC International. And last but not least, R.S. Subramaniam, Senior Vice President and MD, DHL Express. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Thank